topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. Thanks for tuning in this week. Great to have you. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, joining you live from Dallas, home base for me. If we've not met yet and you don't know me, I'm a management consultant, organizational logotherapist, speaker, and author. My team and I help companies to articulate their purpose and build inspirational leaders and cultures activated by meaning and purpose to turn those companies from a flatline EKG to a vibrant workplace where people are intrinsically motivated to perform at their best, grow to their fuller potential, and want to stick around in such a gratifying workplace. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at elisecortez.com. Also, if you like the content of the guests I bring on the show, you may also be interested in the next book that I have coming out in March 2023. It's called The Great Revitalization: How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. You can pre-order your copy at bookshop.org, barnesandnoble.com, and Amazon. Now, let's get into today's program. With me today is Stefan Falk, an internationally recognized executive coach and human performance expert for top business executives, special ops in the armed forces, and elite athletes. He has spent more than 30 years helping thousands of individuals, teams, and organizations become intrinsically motivated, doing what they love to do because they love the experience of doing it, not because of the extrinsic rewards that come with it, such as money and status. He is the author of Intrinsic Motivation, Learn to Love Your Work and Succeed as Never Before, which we'll be talking about in today's program. Stefan, from New York City, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
It's really wonderful. As I often say to my guest, Stefan, I've been hosting the show for 8 years, and for the last 4 or 5 of them, we've been focused on authors. And you brought this beautiful work into the world, Intrinsic Motivation. Look how gorgeous that is. And what I will tell you is, as a person who has brought a child into the world, it is actually more difficult to bring a book into the world. So congratulations.
Yeah, but it's actually, I sort of agree with that. But, in terms of parenting, that's much more difficult and challenging than actually sort of then dealing with the book afterwards.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Well, let's get our listeners and viewers, acquainted with you. Of course, I read your book, so I know this, but I want them to understand really your background and where this book came from. And there's a couple things about what you write about in your introduction specifically that I would love for you to touch on that kind of set the stage for this book. Will you share that with us?
Yes, and I also want to pick up on this beautiful, the name of the show, Working on Purpose, because I think my purpose in life when I look at it, has always been about 2 things. And that is to achieve mastery in whatever I do, just simply become good at it.
Yes.
And I think that's so extremely important for your sense of self-worth, but also the journey of becoming good at something it contains so many experiences that just makes you a more, I think, well-rounded individual. And the second part of the purpose is to always try to be helpful to others.
Yes.
I think that's the path to, mental health, basically. So you forget about yourself and you focus on other people's needs.
Agreed.
And I think for me, and I think that's what you refer to in the book, this book actually started to write itself when I was a little kid. Because when I was a little kid, I was overweight and not very popular among other kids. So I stayed home a lot. And on top of that, I also had a father that had this idea about parenting, that it was basically about spanking. So I was a little bit afraid of him, to say the least.
Yes.
So I spent a lot of time in my room. Now, the good thing when you spend a lot of time alone is that you need to stimulate yourself to do things.
Yes.
So your ability to fantasize grows, and we know by now that the brain becomes really good at what you force it to work on. So the more time you spend alone and the more time you start to fantasize, the better you become at it. Okay, so in order to stimulate yourself and so forth, and that really was a great benefit when my mother, for reasons I still don't know, rented a piano when I was 8 years old. And I just became totally upset with the piano, totally upset. And I started to fantasize about like how it should sound, when I became a virtuoso and so forth. And so I started to hammer away on that poor piano for 2-3 hours a day. And my mother, she was like, "Oh, what have I done?" Because it sounded terrible. But I persisted and I persisted and I persisted. And I think that, my fantasy here just basically made it able for me to deal with all the discomfort I felt myself and disappointment every time I touched the piano and it didn't sound like, my fantasy. And then all of a sudden one day, I think it was like maybe a year and a half after I got the piano, I sat down and played and it just felt differently. It, like everything fell into place. And I played something and then my mother came and said, "Just keep that." Now, so the fantasize part here was really important for me and to touch it to really become good at something. And then that continued. So I became super good at playing piano, I would say. And so I was invited to play at graduations for all the students and so forth. So life was really good. I was doing something I loved and everything was fantastic. But the thing that was not so fantastic was that my grades just went down the drain.
Right.
So I was told that, with those grades, in terms of, higher education and whatever, I think I was 14 by this time or 13, it doesn't look really good. So in a moment of very rare brilliance, I asked myself, school is so dull, it's so boring, I can't stand it. But what if I can figure out what makes piano so extraordinarily fantastic?
For you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then apply that to school.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did. And then, did really well in school and so forth. And the things I figured out has basically served me really well throughout my life. I learned to play 4 instruments. I've been working as an art director, copywriter, creative director for a fashion magazine even. I've been a McKinsey consultant, good career there. And I've been a C-suite executive, and now I'm a coach. And I sort of achieved mastery in all these situations. And that has nothing to do with IQ, because I promise you, all the times I've done IQ test, I have slightly above average IQ.
Mm-hmm.
So this is all about that. So that's sort of my story.
Okay, brilliant way to situate the conversation, Stefan. Now, I want to also call out. Last week I had Dr. Soren Kaplan on the show talking about experiential intelligence. And he really put forth what you just said here: is that everybody has a set of experiences that have given us a lens on the world that only we can see and serve from. And you just gave it to us beautifully as to what your experience has been that really helped shape you and give you this beautiful way of seeing the world. And to take that the next step further, then I say what I consider that you did in the book is you built what I would consider to be an irrefutable case for why cultivating excitement is so important. So if you could talk a little bit about that, and then I want to read a little bit from your book. It's just so beautiful.
Yeah. No, I think, excitement and the ability, I mean, that drives the ability, to love something. Okay. You really want to do it.
Right.
And it's sort of a virtuous cycle. It's like when you love to do something, you love to think about it before you do it. And that means that you have some kind of plan, maybe not written down, but you have some kind of vision for what you want to achieve when you do the thing you love. And that leads to that you actually perform much better. And so you enjoy it even more. And then you also like to think about what you love after you have done it, and that deepens your learning. So it rapidly leads to development. But in order to continue to develop your skills when you do the things you love, you need to increase the complexity of it. Okay. And that's the trick, because, and this is sort of intrinsic motivation is, when you have that experiences. My mentor, Csikszentmihalyi, he called it flow. And that's the highest level. And it happens when you are involved in solving a challenging problem that interests you. That's the key word. It interests you. And that's when you get this amazing experience, this feeling of that. And that's the brain's way of rewarding you for you living up to one of the key survival strategies we have as human beings, which is to learn and develop. Had we not done that, we would not be here today, and we would certainly not have had a video call today, okay? So that's important. But the thing is that even though the brain rewards us for this, it rewards us even more for saving energy. And that's why we over time lose interest in the things we once loved, and also have a hard time to take a natural interest in things. And that is certainly the case, in the workplace. Very few things seem to come natural to us in terms of being interesting.
So 2 things to that, Stefan. First, I really want to call out for our listeners and viewers that what you've been talking about here, when you keep loving something, keep loving the experience of learning and doing something and getting better at it, you constantly seek greater complexity and challenge. And then really what that does, listeners and viewers, ladies and gentlemen, is it really helps you distinguish your contribution. And so that makes you unique. It makes you irreplaceable. It makes you really stand out. And we all want that. So I want to call that out first. The second thing is I was hopelessly jealous that your mentor is, and I want you to be able to pronounce his full name for us. Please say his full name correctly.
Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, but he said, "Okay, call me Mike."
Mike. Okay, and
let me just share something about Mike. He passed. I think it was last year.
97. Last year. Okay.
Yeah. And that is every time I felt that I had come up with something really smart, and I said, I made the insight.
Yes.
And we sat down. I just realized that he had thought about that 20 years before me.
Right. You say that in the book so beautifully.
Yeah. Yes. And I mean, if you read his work, it's so complete. I don't think that there is any person that knows more about the human condition than he did. Magnificent.
I agree. And for those of you who are not understanding Stefan's accent, he's talking about the author of Flow, who is extremely well known. It's very hard to understand and say his name. So just look up the book Flow and you'll see who he's talking about. It's magnificent work.
Yeah.
Okay, so now what I want to do is I turn the coin on the other side here. So you next also talk about, and you alluded to it earlier, is when you don't love doing what you do, then you also become overly attached to extrinsic rewards like praise and money. So how I want to situate this for this conversation, given the work that I do and this listenership, is so if we can get organizations to get people more fixated on doing the things that they actually love, getting them to tap into what I call passion, then we don't have to just keep throwing money at people to keep them to stay. They want to stay because they're doing what they love. And that's so important. And most organizations are not putting forth any effort to help people understand what it is they really love to do.
No, I totally agree with you. And I think the case is that if your end game is to make a lot of money, for instance, it's really smart to learn to love everything you need to do in order to achieve that, okay? Because I think the big bucks actually comes with mastery, when you become really good at something. That's it. So I don't think so. I think the problem is that given what I said, that the brain sort of tends to, much more reward us, for when we are saving energy, is that we need to find a way to unlock our intrinsic motivation for things we don't like. Because what happens when we don't, if we cannot do that, we actually can never really succeed in reaching any type of goal or be satisfied at work, because work will eventually, entail stuff that is boring, that is uninteresting, that's too difficult, that is uncomfortable, whatever it is. And the same thing with the goal. So you need to find a way to make everything you find uninteresting or boring or whatever, turn that into sort of a challenging problem that actually interests you to pursue. Okay, and that you do with your head. That has to do with how you think about things. That has nothing to do with the task or the activity. And the best evidence for that is that someone can love that type of activity and another person just hates it. Has nothing to do with the activity. only with how you think about it. So in my world, there are no boring activities or scary activities, only boring or scaring ways to think about them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you give us a tremendous key in your book on how to actually master that whole process. And that is, you say, the fastest and most effective way to learn to love any activity is to engage in exciting outcome-focused behavior, FEO, as opposed to activity-focused behavior, which is the norm among professionals. That's really what you're getting at, is it not?
Yeah. And maybe we should just like talk a little bit about activity-based behavior and what drives it, because then the brain and its energy-saving focus comes in again. And I would say, the normal trajectory that I've seen across the thousands of people I worked with, both as an executive and then as a coach, is that you come into work and then you learn how to perform your skills and or your tasks, and then you, when you're subconsciously or consciously think that, okay, now I know how to do it, you basically intellectually log out and you start to perform your tasks on habit. Okay.
Right.
Now, and that's energy saving, because we don't think so much. And we should also understand that active thinking draws more energy than physical exercise. So there's always a resistance to think too much. It's also painful for us.
Yes.
So we log out and we start to operate on habit. What happens when we operate on habit and don't think about how we do things is that we lose sight of actually how we do things. So if a new leader comes in, or whatever new strategy that tells you, okay, now, Elise, you need to perform more during the same time, or you need to perform much better. You don't even know where to start because you don't know how to do it. And I've seen this in hundreds of cases when people come to me and say, oh, I have too much to do. Okay, let's write down everything you have to do. And then we go through each item. What's the purpose of it? What do you need to deliver? How do you do it? Which steps? And they can barely explain that.
Right.
Okay? That's a problem. Now, this leads to a negative spiral with procrastination, boredom, and all these things. So at the end of it, you can actually become sick. I call it workosis. It's almost like the same type of thing that animals in captivity can experience. They call it zoochosis.
Yeah.
Now, the other path is to recognize in yourself when you need to switch on your intrinsic motivation. Anything boring, anything scary, anything too difficult, anything that doesn't naturally put you in that more exciting mode of feeling for the activity. How do you do that? Well, the simplest ways to start is to really think about the activity and then design what you mentioned, an exciting outcome. Yeah. And an exciting outcome is just to think about, okay, when I perform this task, what would be really exciting for me to be able to do, to achieve here? And you can think in 3 dimensions. You can think in the time you spend focusing, performing the activity. You can think in terms of the complexity of the quantity, how much you want to produce of the thing, or if you can add stuff to it and do things simultaneously in it that makes it more interesting. Or you can think in terms of quality, like precision. You want to perform it without any errors whatsoever. Or you can also think about the value for others. So if I produce this task in a much better way, in a much more interesting way, what would be the value for the people dependent on it? Because in an organization, everything I do, the main purpose of that is to enable someone else to do something else. In the simplest form, enable them to avoid having to do my work. Okay? That's it.
Right.
But I want to go back just to the first one.
Okay, yeah. Hold on. Let's grab our first break because I want you to be able to go into it, and we're running out of time.
Okay.
So let's take that first break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We're on the air with Stefan Falk, who's the author of Intrinsic Motivation: Learn to Love Your Work and Succeed as Never Before. We've been talking so far about really getting grounded in his core philosophy. After the break, we're going to talk about how we can use this philosophy to really sharpen our individual saws to become our best and really master what we want to master. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to the program. Before we get back into our guest, I do want to invite you to check out the first book that I put out. It's called Purpose Ignited. And I really wrote it to awaken readers to their passion and purpose and start them down the path of becoming inspirational leaders. It's the basis of my Vitally Inspired program. So I hope you'll check that out as well while you're out there checking out Stefan Falk's book. If you're just joining us, my guest is Stefan Falk. He's an internationally recognized executive coach and human performance expert for top business executives, special ops in the armed forces, and elite athletes. He's the author of Intrinsic Motivation, Learn to Love Your Work and Succeed as Never Before. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. So just before we went on break there, you wanted to say something else about what we were last speaking about there, about cultivating intrinsic motivation and excitement. What was it?
Yeah, it was about the three ways you either separately or in combination can come up with an exciting outcome. And the one that is the easiest one to start with is time. Anything that you think is boring, cut the time in half.
Right.
And then think about how to do it. And all of a sudden, it's not about the task itself. It's about solving the problem. How do I do this in half the time compared to how the time it usually takes with still a good result? That's a pretty exciting thing. I use that every time, I clean the apartment, which is not maybe my favorite thing to do. But I always try to make it like, okay, I want to do it in, an hour, 25 minutes. It usually takes me an hour, 45 minutes. Okay, I want to do that. And then I also want to cook at the same time. What can I cook that doesn't need oversight? So it's about thinking about it like that. And then all of a sudden, I just do it. I don't care that I'm cleaning. I'm trying to solve my problem and follow my plan. That is actually the foundation of intrinsic motivation. And then over time, when I do it, I build mastery in cleaning. And then all of a sudden I start to enjoy it.
It's beautiful. And and what I love about this, Stefan, is you're really talking about really helping us, I don't want to say gamify our lives, but really helping us activate our creativity, our problem solving in order to make everyday life and its activities exciting and interesting to us. And there's so much utility in that. So to unlock it further, there's a few more things I really want to get out of this next section because there was so much I had to choose from your book. But you talked to us about mindset. So you're very much talking about mindset here. So you say in your book, our mindset is made up of our conscious and our unconscious beliefs and expectations about what is possible, and hence what we should aspire to, what priorities we should set, and what kinds of people we are drawn to. When you visualize your mindset in a clear and tangible way as a set of beliefs and think them through, you activate the most powerful part of your brain, the unconscious. That sounds so alluring.
I mean, it is, and I mean, the unconscious mind, it's the most powerful part of us because it works 24/7, and it has, one of the prime responsibilities of it is to help us to work toward our goals and execute on what we believe are our preferences. So help us basically with quick decision making. And it's really a powerful thing. So that's why you need to be very mindful about what thoughts you allow in your head about who you are and how you think, because that's almost like an instruction to your unconscious mind to get working. And you really, for instance, if you set the goal and then you don't put enough effort in working toward your goal, and then your unconscious mind is trying to help you, but you're not having any progress, it's going to wake you up at night. I think that's one of the most common reasons why you have bad sleep, is that you have some kind of conflict with, what your unconscious mind thinks it's going to help you with, and you're not helping out. So it wakes you up and say, okay, now, I'm not having any progress, help me out here. So it's extremely important. And I think I also mentioned in the book some other research where the mindset not only shapes the unconscious, focus and what it does and how it helps us. It also shapes, how our body function.
Very powerful, very powerful. But, well, another concept that we have to talk about that I think will really help our listeners and viewers is you distinguish between a victim mentality and a detective mindset. Oh, this is so good. So you say instead of practicing a victim mentality, which you and I know and recognize very well in the work we do inside organizations, instead best to practice that detective mindset. So you say if someone is mean or difficult to work with, turn them into an interesting problem to solve, just like what we're talking about. Make it your project to find out why this person behaves in the way they do and how you can manage the person more effectively. That opens up so much possibility and enables and empowers people to deal with difficult people. Then, as you say in your book, shuts them down or makes them want to go away from them.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about it on this level, I think few people would disagree with us. Okay, that at the end of the day, if I start to think about myself as a victim, I'm really handicapping myself.
That's right.
And I'm not realizing the fact that I am the only one that I can attempt to fully trust. Okay? And that's tricky because, we never know when we're going to do strange things, whatever. But and I have myself in life. I'm not saying that we should not, embrace other people, but you need to start first of all, start to trust yourself. And if something is really not good, I need to do something about it myself. I can't blame others.
Right.
Even if someone is, being bad toward me, okay? Yes, of course, that person should not be bad. But in order to change that, I need to do something. Either I need to get out of the way, or I need to figure out a way to deal with that person in a better way. But if I do nothing and just feel like a victim, nothing good will come out of that.
Well, so what I love about what you're talking about, Stefan, it so aligns with the work that I do, is what you're talking about in my parlance is activating human agency. So if we allow ourselves to be a victim, there's no agency in that. And ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know the word agency, it means to make things happen, to make something happen. So this detective mindset. So you really suggest that, if you might observe someone at work, a nemesis, to try to figure out why they say what they do and behave the way they do, and to consider how the clients themselves, the people themselves, we might be contributing to that behavior. Again, also tremendously agentic in being able to see. So it's like studying this person in a detective sort of fashion to see what their motives are and such, and where are you in all this? There's again something very strong and opening in that.
Yeah, and I've linked to this. I mean, there is. I mean, I think psychiatrists, psychology, they talk about in the positive sense of disassociation. You basically regulate your emotions and you start to actually think in a logical, rational way about what you have actually experienced with the person, which is good for your health because negative emotions slows your brain down. You become a very poor problem solver. It's not good for your immune system. It's worsened. And then also all types of negativity have a tendency to hijack our mind. We cannot stop thinking about it because negativity is associated by the primitive parts of our mind, like the amygdala, as potential danger. So it's logical from a primitive standpoint to be hijacked of it. So for instance, if you have a person that you don't relate really well with at the office, you had some meltdowns with that person. And now you have a meeting coming up with that person the coming week. That's a meeting that's 1 hour. There is a tendency that the mind views the whole coming week as a bad week. But it's only actually 1 hour out of 40 hours or 35 hours or how many hours you actually work. Okay. And then we think so much, we don't want to think about it. And when we don't think about it, it becomes sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Instead of preparing ourselves and trying to figure out, okay, now I'm meeting that person. How am I going to spin that situation? How do I usually do? What happens then? And what happens with the person? Can I try something differently? You basically make it, that's an interesting problem. Let me try something else here, okay? And then you evaluate after. That's also sort of the exciting outcome type of methodology used in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
But there is also this is what I find that. So in my coaching, I don't allow any blaming or any whining or anything like that. Okay?
Yeah, you say that in the book. It's awesome.
Just forget about it. And it's not for me. It's not because I'm not compassionate. I'm probably extraordinarily compassionate because I view all my clients as my kids. All my clients as my kids. That's the mindset I have, because that enables me to think about them all the time, effortlessly. But I find that when you really sit down and talk about the reason for all these negative thoughts, there is nothing left.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing left in it. So people also need to, for instance, if you have a bad relationship with a person at work, do like a detective. You write the timeline on a whiteboard, and then you plot all the interactions you have had with that person. And then you mark all the ones that have been bad. And chances are, out of 50 interactions, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 have been bad. Okay, is that really a bad relationship then, or not? No, because we have a tendency to remember the negative things before the positive and neutral things.
Right. So what I want to also bring home, which I think is just so delightful in your book, is you say, the world is filled with difficult people.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to grow and shape your destiny, you must master the art of transforming difficult situations with difficult people into productive ones.
Mm-hmm.
That's the opportunity. So use the stuff we've been talking about, and it'd be great to hear back from you. It would be great to hear, hey, I used your stuff, Stefan, and here's what happened. So you've seen, we both posted on LinkedIn. So we'd love to hear how this stuff is working for you once you start using this in the world. So let's throw it out there as a challenge to our listeners and viewers.
Yeah, no, but okay. I have clients that I'm going to quit. I can't work with that person. Whatever it is, and then 2 weeks later. That's really interesting. I think the collaboration is really picking up now, and it's actually a really valuable person. I learn a lot from this person. Oh, wait, two weeks ago you were quitting. Okay, so.
Yes, so Stefan to the rescue, because you've activated and enabled their own capacity to be able to practice this detective mentality. So with that, let's grab our last break here and let you all think about what we've been talking about here, going from a victim to a detective. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We're on the air with Stefan Falk, who's the author of Intrinsic Motivation, Learn to Love Your Work and Succeed as Never Before. We've been talking a bit about how you can use his concepts, his philosophy in your everyday life to become your best and really sharpen your own saw. After the break, we're going to learn how we can use this stuff to develop people and organizations and to heighten our own leadership capacity and impact. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. One other bit of news I want to share with you is the anthology that I curated, Passionately Striving and Why, is available. It's a collection of 25 stories from women around the world that I recruited from Australia to Zambia, and they share their stories of how they discovered their purpose and are serving from it. So there's power in story, there's education, there's inspiration. So I'll help you check that out for yourself as well. My guest today is Stefan Falk, who has spent more than 30 years helping thousands of individuals, teams, and organizations become intrinsically motivated, doing what they love to do because they love the experience of doing it, not because of the extrinsic rewards that come with it, such as money and status. He's the author of Intrinsic Motivation, Learn to Love Your Work and Succeed as Never Before. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. So for this last segment here, I really wanted to get into the meat of being able to utilize this stuff as leaders and developing the team here. And of course, I terribly align with what you say here. You say that The greatest responsibility of a leader is to make sure that all of their direct reports develop their skills and mindsets, and that they do that in an integrated way in their everyday work. The leader's focus is one thing only, to turn on all their direct reports into star performers who unleash their unlimited potential through their everyday work. Completely agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of two enigmas in business, as I see it. The first one is that it's not a requirement for anyone that has an aspiration to be a leader to know a thing or two about neuroscience and psychology and all these things. It's almost like, I want to be a CFO. Okay, what do you know about finance? Nothing, but I have cash in my wallet. Okay, good. I mean, saying, okay, I've been a leader before. Yeah, of course, you might have a little bit better starting point than a person that has not been a leader before. Or I'm a human being. Yeah, you have. Yeah, well, that's okay starting point. But you need to know a thing or two about the mind, how it operates, and how to keep the mind healthy, because daily development is one of the 5 key levers for good brain health, and good brain health decides everything in your life. Okay, that's it. So I think that there's an element here of that. So that's a paradox, that is not a requirement. And there's so much good neuroscience and insights out there that is readily available and not too technical for everybody to understand. Okay. The second thing is that a goal, okay, if you think about the goal, for anything to be a goal, it has to be beyond where we are today. Otherwise, it's not a goal. Okay. In a company, what is the company? It's the sum of the individuals. So the reason why we are here and not at our goal is because what we know how to do today and how we do things today. Then we need to do something differently. We need to learn something new, and we need to do different things and all this to be at that goal. Okay, so that's the logic. And this is the only area in the business world where the best interest of the people is completely overlapped to the best interest of the company. Okay. That's it. There's no other area. This area it is. So if you as a leader can help and give the gift to your people that they actually develop, okay, that's a great gift. They will give you the gift that you will reach the goals. Simple as that. Simple as that. So how do you do it? Well, I was fairly successful at this when I was an executive, and what I did, I explained this with human science or like neuroscience, so people understood it, because it also gives them a deeper self-understanding. And then I was firm on that this is a place where you every day need to do something better. Either it's tweaking a detail in how you perform a certain task, or you learn something new, or whatever it is. I don't care. But every day you need to do something different, something new, and something better. Okay, and you're going to be held accountable for that. And the second thing I did was to have frequent, one-on-ones with all my people. At once I had 37 direct reports, so you can understand.
Oh my goodness.
I spent most of my time in that. On the other hand, I had perfect insight in what happened in all my departments. So when I went to the executive team to talk about it, I didn't even prepare. I know exactly what was happening. So some simple principles that needs to be in place. And when you do it, when you unleash this power, I remember I had in one situation I came in, and I think the average age in my departments was like 53 years old or whatever. And after 1 year we had a Christmas party, and I had basically worked this way with all of them. And I think 25 of these 37 showed up, because they were like spread over the country. And before we ate, I just stood up and I just talked to each of the persons.
Yes.
Where they started, the year, and what they had achieved, and what I perceived to be their actual skill development and all these things. Okay, and I could do it because I spent so much time with them. I didn't even have to prepare. And then, after a couple of hours, a couple of them came to me and I was crying, and they said that now we realize how extraordinary work can be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's
And,
it.
and you say that beautifully in the book, Stefan. You give that example in the book so beautifully. And so I want to speak to that aspect in just a second, what it is to be able to help people to develop. But before we do that, I really want to get into what you also talk about in the book here. And so many organizations are not doing this, Stefan. They're not putting resources behind developing their people, getting their people to grow. And you say the only sustainable way to reach ever higher corporate goals is to make sure people constantly develop in their everyday work. And you have a whole long list of why that's so, right? Because just one example is because becoming more engrossed in their task, which enables them to develop their intrinsic motivation. There's just so many things. So if you could just speak to a couple of those things about, why ongoing everyday development and everyday task is so critical to being sustainable for a company.
Yeah, but if you think about that, like task execution, we take that as an example. And we got, remember when I talked about activity-based behavior when you operate on habit, you basically perform the task, more or less the same way repeatedly, day in and day out, or whenever you perform the task. If we place that into the world of sports, we place it into the world of tennis, okay? That would be like Roger Federer or Rafael Nadal or Serena Williams or whoever. They learn how to hit the backhand perfectly from one place on the court. But if the ball comes somewhere else, okay, they cannot hit the backhand.
Right.
And that's the situation in the business world. No situation is equal or similar to another situation. There's always something that is changed that should trigger you to perform your tasks in slightly different ways to be fully relevant. That's the fact of life. No moment is the same. All moments are unique, okay? So that's what you do. Now, when you do that, when you find these different angles and you improve how you do this little detail, you tweak it a little bit and so forth, okay, you build mastery. And when you build mastery, you have such a deep insight into your tasks. So if you're under pressure saying that, now we have to deliver what we have to deliver in 2 weeks instead of 6 weeks, how do we do it? A person with mastery knows exactly which trade-offs he or she can do. Exactly. They don't even feel pressure. They almost like, that's going to be interesting. Cut the time, with 2/3. That's an interesting problem, but I think I can do that. Maybe not with exactly the same result, but with, a little bit of a trade-off, maybe 10% of the result. That's fine. For me, this is so logical. It's so clear.
It is for me too.
Yeah.
It is for me too. But you and I are steeped in the neurological science that you've been talking about, psychology, motivational theories, etc. So to that end, what also makes so much sense? I mean, I hear leaders are frustrated sometimes, like they can't attract people, they can't seem to motivate people, they can't seem to keep them. Yet you also talk about this idea of when people are constantly developing in their everyday work. One of the other fantastic side effects is they continuously formulate more ambitious goals and aspirations than people who don't develop, simply because people who develop continuously realize there is no limit for what they can achieve and what they can become. So now you've literally turned on the whole organization's spigot by turning on the learning so that people are literally, you can feel the place abuzz. And I've experienced this in organizations.
Yeah. But far too few organizations experience this, and that's sort of the problem, because it becomes a situation where no one sees the forest for all the trees, because all the companies are the same. I just saw some interesting posts on LinkedIn, a study that now was aiming to really investigate basically the people factor in companies' performance. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. It's almost like, think about the NHL team in Dallas trying to win the Stanley Cup. And then they say, okay, what are the levers for our success here? Probably the Zamboni machines. No, I think it's the quality of the helmets, probably, or maybe the outfits need to be glorious, fantastic, magnificent. Okay, but what about the players? We're not certain about that. If they matter so much. What's the difference between an LHA? I talk about hockey because I'm a hockey nerd. Okay.
Yeah, you did talk about that.
Yeah, and of course the people factor is as big in a company. Obviously, a company might have, worked up assets that can keep them floating and still competitive. It can have some patents and whatever, okay? But, those things will not make a major difference in the long run. It's always the people.
Right, right. So to bring this home, because we're coming close to the end of time here, one of the other major reasons that you cite in your book to develop people from the vantage point of a leader, you say, and this is so powerful, and you alluded to it earlier, you say, there is no more powerful way to create a healthy bond between you, your direct reports, and their bond with the company than to make sure they are personally and professionally developing. The unique bond this creates is the ultimate reward for you as the leader. The deep sense of purpose you'll experience from observing direct reports grow and accomplish things they did not think they were capable of as unrivaled and cannot be derived from any other experience except parenting. Completely agree with that.
Yeah. No, but it goes back to what we talked about initially. I say, okay, my purpose has always been achieving mastery, because it makes me a more grounded individual.
Right.
Taking the pain of not knowing anything, but then pushing yourself to this sense of I'm starting to get it. Oh, now I failed. I'm
Right.
starting to get it. I mean, that's such a cleansing, for your soul. But then also helping others. You forget about yourself. Just forget about your self-centeredness. You're basically helping someone. I mean, when I see my clients succeed, 6 months I can live on that experience.
Right.
That's magnificent. I had one person that when I met that person, she looked like a ghost. She didn't even dare to look me in the eye. She had gotten a super bad performance review in one of the sort of really high pressure environments, in the business world, and basically was a coach out case almost. And
Right.
This is like 3 years ago, and we worked together for a year and a half, and I saw progress and all these things. And now, just a month ago, I got an email from her, and now she's been promoted to this, like, really, challenging position in the same company, and she's like a different person.
Right.
So and what is better than that in terms of reward? And this is an opportunity open for all leaders. All leaders. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. You don't have to be anything. You just have to focus on this.
And this goes back and to really wanting to matter in people's lives. You can matter as a leader big time when you practice this, just what you were talking about. So with that, here we are. We managed already to get to the end of the conversation. So Stefan, that this show is listening to people across the world. And what they care about is they want to be able to build workplaces where people actually want to come. I call them destination workplaces. We are led by inspirational leaders who do just what you say that you do. Bring them to their greatness. And we do business that betters the world. What would you like to leave them with today?
One thing, and that's not my idea, I'm sorry, but have this as sort of a principle. People you meet, they should have more energy after they have met you than they had before.
That is a great way to close. Stefan, thank you. I'm very grateful, our passive Prost. Your work has enlivened, inspired, and elevated my consciousness and my understanding of the world and my work. I thank you very much for that and for sharing with our listeners and viewers across the world. Thank you for being on Working on Purpose.
Thanks for having me. It's been an honor.
Listeners and viewers, if you want to learn more about Stefan Falk, his book or his work, start by visiting his website, learntoloveyourwork.com. Once again, learntoloveyourwork.com. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. We were on the air with Dr. Dante Vaughn talking about the book he co-authored, From Culture to Culture, the system to define, implement, measure, and improve your company culture. We talked about how to operationalize your culture, and he really gave us some deep insight into how to do so. Very, very powerful episode. Next week, we'll be on the air with Michael Glausser talking about his new book, One People, One Planet, 6 Universal Truths for Being Happy Together. You will find fascinating and learn in this episode that these 6 truths are gleaned from the founders of the great world religions, world-renowned philosophers, and cutting-edge research in the field of positive psychology. See you there. Remember that work is an integral and important part of our lives and can be one of the best adventures and means of realizing our potential and making the impact we crave. So let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.